Hey, everybody, welcome back to the show. I'm your host for today, Ben Thomas. Our world continues to have a power demand that just is almost insurmountable, it feels like at times. You've got data centers, you've got ESG and compliance, EV charging, you've got questions about solar, all these different things. So today we want to dive in and break down just a little bit more about some of those challenges, but also talk about how the labor market has completely evolved from an electrical installation standpoint. And to have that conversation, I brought on my friend Jason Zipprian. Jason, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Hello, it's good to be here live in person. So wanted to take the opportunity to come see y'all's wonderful studio and get a chance to meet you.
Well, I appreciate it. It's great to have you in and great to see you in person, both Texans. So, we got to make that plug in there for anybody watching that's not Texan. Sorry, we're pretty proud about it. But, Jason, it's really a great time to have you in, right? I mean, Texas, sort of all places, ironically, has been the conversation starter for a lot of different electrical conversations over the last couple of years, especially when you talk about redundancy, battery backups, EV charging, all these different places. How do people really start to unpack that even beyond just sort of the Texas geographical location here?
Well, and as far as the growth in the country or just Texas in general?
Well, all the country, really, to start us out.
Yeah, and our roots started in Texas, obviously. The owner, Bill Graham, started 43 years ago in San Antonio, and then corporate office came along right after that. So Texas has been very strong, geographically good state for us, and then we've expanded from there, and because of the growth, throughout the country and the many men and women that have come and joined FSG that work all across the country.
Well, Jason, you talk about the crew at FSG. I always love to ask this question. I want to hear a little bit about your story and how you got plugged into sort of the world of commercial electricity and installation, and how you landed at FSG.
Well, I needed a job.
That's a good place to start, yeah.
Years ago I got started. I was just kind of 18 years old, didn't know what I wanted to do, ended up living with my cousin in Houston. He worked for an air conditioning and electrical contracting firm. I was looking for work elsewhere, but they had a need that particular day, and it happened to be in the electrical department. And he said, "Hey, do you want to just come to work for the day or whatever?" And I said, "Sure." I definitely needed the money, and so I went to work, and I was a hard worker, and thankfully they just kept inviting me back. And I traveled the country doing electrical projects and whatnot. And my now wife was then my girlfriend. She was graduating from A&M, and so it was time to settle down. And I ended up moving back to South Texas, and a friend of mine that I had met while traveling happened to live in the area and work for, back then, what was called Design Electric. And so I said, "Well, where are you going, when you finish this project?" Because they were a little slow at the time. He said, "Well, I'm going back to Design Electric." And I said, "Well, do you mind if I go with you? And I'll just see if they're hiring, right?" And he said, "Yeah, I don't think they are, because they were a little slow, and that's why he was doing something else." And when he went back, I walked in, and the rest is history. They hired me. It was probably $8 an hour, and I needed it, and I was thankful to have it. And there's been unlimited opportunity for me. So I'm very blessed to be with FSG.
Well, now you get to live the corporate life, right?
Yeah, no, it's demanding, a different type of demand, but it's demanding, but it's rewarding. And it's always been rewarding my whole career. I've been here 29 years, and it's just phenomenal what opportunities I've been given and the great men and women that I've been able to work with all throughout the years.
Yeah, well, Jason, I'll be honest. I mean, I've had the chance to really see a lot of that growth firsthand over the last 10 or so years. And, it's been cool to watch how you guys have been able to adapt with sort of the changing, I hate to say landscape, that's sort of a weird way to say it, but there's demand for EV charging. There's conversations around solar, battery backups, ESG compliance. And you guys haven't steered away from a lot of those conversations. How has that sort of desire to stay up to date with what's happening really driven the growth for FSG?
Well, and honestly, the demand in the market, where's the market going? Where's the market growing? That's what we align ourselves with, so that we grow along with the market and capitalize on those opportunities that are abundant, right? And that's how we build our teams. That's how we manage, our workflows, is essentially around what market vertical is actually increasing and has the most growth that we want to pursue.
Yeah, obviously locally we see a lot of manufacturing, storage, supply chain, stuff like that. What vertical markets do you guys see a lot of growth in from an electrical standpoint?
We have seen a really nice, increase in mission critical, which is your data centers, water, wastewater has seen those contracts. Again, growth monetarily is essentially tied to contract values. So those contracts are obviously much larger. The data centers are getting larger. The water treatment plants are getting larger. So the contract values are obviously tracking along with that growth. So I would say those are two, and then also the medical work. There's a large increase. Dallas is, definitely central to very large medical facilities, and they're on developing the future of what medical is and will become because of the population growth.
Yeah. Well, I want to stick a pin in the data center conversation real quick and hang out here, because I think a lot of people just hear AI and data centers and don't actually take that to its full realization of the power draw that these places pull is unbelievable, right? In most cases now, many of them have their own on-site power generation, right? So the demands for something like that from an electrical infrastructure standpoint are vastly different from a commercial office building or something like that. Can you talk about sort of those demands for those hardened and those mission-critical places from an electrical infrastructure standpoint?
That's actually where, the growth is happening, is whoever has the power and whoever has the land to develop these data centers. So that's where we see the largest growth for data centers. Data center as a market vertical for us is growing double-digit compound growth, and that's for the foreseeable future, for the next 5 to 10 years easy. The demand on the infrastructure, the grid, probably just for data centers operating somewhere in the 25 gigawatt range, and the growth of that is going to be threefold by 2030. So they're, essentially the grid will have to accommodate the growth in the data center market, and that needs to grow upwards of 80 gigawatts of power that these data centers are going to consume. We're talking a lot about it. We're in it. Dallas and Austin does a lot of data center work. So it's important that we obviously follow those market trends and ensure that we continue to provide the capabilities to produce, not only a safe project, but a high quality project for the benefit of FSG.
Yeah. How early do you find yourselves in those data center projects? Is it at design? Is it at spec? I mean, when typically are you guys brought into that conversation?
It really revolves around, because it is a highly specialized, challenging, fast-paced construction project. So the experience in data centers, actually having a resume of completing data centers with those large general contractors, because they're in the same boat, you form those relationships, and as those data centers come up for pricing or budgeting or whatever that might be, we are aligned very well with getting and receiving those opportunities for us to pursue.
Well, you talked about some of those GCs, and obviously you guys are doing some incredible work as well. But one of the challenges is that the demand is so high, it's very difficult to staff. And we talked about this off camera a little bit. Sort of it feels like the culture has shifted back to blue collar jobs really being a little bit more glorified maybe than they used to be. But the challenges still are that we don't have nearly enough talent to supply the demand for labor right now. Can you talk a little bit about some of the challenges that the market is kind of seeing right now from a staffing standpoint, especially in blue collar industries like ours?
It is very challenging. That is the single most valuable asset that we have, is our people, always. But staffing at increasingly large numbers for these jobs, because of the size that they're getting, is becoming difficult, because the supply of the workforce, or the skilled workforce in the electrical industry, is becoming, and has been, a very big challenge. And that is one of, if not the most important limiting factor on our growth, is being able to employ those workers. And then also we have a Propel Academy. It's a career development academy for skills trade, and it's a 4-year electrical apprenticeship program. So, we're trying to create excitement around which path do college or high school, leaving high school, could go to college or could go to skills trade. The wages are increasing, that, essentially it's starting to outpace what potentially in the older days was college graduate, you make so much. Now the skills trade, you get out of a 4-year apprenticeship school, you're making a very competitive wage that generally will outpace a college graduate or a college educated individual. There is some attraction there, but the demand is so high. it almost feels like you don't see it.
Well, it's kind of baffling to me. Literally, I think earlier this week, the CEO of NVIDIA said that the next generation of millionaires and billionaires are going to be electricians and plumbers. A, there's so much demand for it, but B, there's so much entrepreneurial opportunity, right? Whether through subcontractors or whether bringing in staffing, whether, just having skills that are in demand in the market. It's been nice to see that shift because, we've even talked about it on the show, the demand is not going away, right? The demand for power, the demand for connectivity, the demand for utilities is not going away anytime soon. And those who really set themselves up for success now have a massive growth opportunity ahead of them.
I agree. And, essentially that's what we're trying to do is continue to get the word out, create that excitement, make the skills trade and the career path, exciting for an individual that, is thinking about their future, because the future on the skills trade and the electrical industry in general is very exciting, and it's going to be very lucrative financially for any individual that has a family and, wants to move up through the trade. There's going to be opportunities that are almost endless.
Well, look, and obviously opportunities with FSG, that's a great place to get plugged in, right? I mean, I don't know, this is your show, but we're allowed to plug the product, I guess, a little bit.
Of course. Look.
I don't know, it's giant letters behind us. I don't even know who's on, who my guest is right now. I don't know, maybe that'll help. But it's interesting. I mean, you talk about FSG. You guys do such a good job of sort of bridging that gap between what I would call the ultra high level commercial and even some of the stuff that is more, I don't know that small, medium business is necessarily the right word, but you guys do such a good job of approaching projects of all sizes, right? How are you able to build in that scale into the workflow that you have, and how are you able to sort of communicate the value of a partner like FSG to the highest of highs in some of those middle of the road customers as well?
Yeah, and I would say, just we've taken our lumps, not every project goes perfect, and different market verticals that we pursued didn't necessarily go just smooth, and transitioning into those market verticals. So obviously, again, it boils down to the people. So when we see talented individuals that are looking to make a change, even if we don't necessarily have exactly where we need to put them, you just hire them, right? So you hire people that have the skills and the talent, and they can add value, and we'll figure out where they need to be. But essentially, it's growing within FSG, bringing on new talent, because it is about the people that are going to do the work. That's going to do the work that makes us credible. That's what adds value is bringing on the talent, and then also having a very tenured group of individuals that work for FSG. I've been here 29 years. You see a lot of the FSG people have that Rolex on. That's 25 years. You might see some people that have a Mont Blanc pen. That's 5 years. So you see those awards, and as you're navigating your way around different operations and whatnot, you see the pen and you might see the Rolex. And so you begin to feel that warmth of just having someone that is tenured and growing their capabilities, growing their skill sets, but being part of something that's bigger.
Well, and that obviously starts sort of at the beginning of the search and sales process, but it doesn't end as soon as, you put the final nail in the coffin of a project, right? There's obviously support on the back end. But I'm curious, you've got so many new stakeholders really that are finding their way into the world, whether it's facilities, whether it's compliance, ESG management, that are trying to figure out ways, whether it's new builds or retrofits, to reinvigorate sort of their electrical infrastructure and become more compliant, add things like EV charging or solar. How are people finding their way to you now? And has that evolved a little bit, maybe in the last 5 to 10 years?
I think word in the market's obviously important. Marketing, right, is a big deal. Our marketing team grows and expands its capabilities, touching those different areas of the market basically through the web. And then our capabilities speak for themselves, because of either past projects, the resume, the depth chart that we have with all of our employees. That really helps resonate with the end user or the client to where we have credibility. They want to work with professionals that they can trust. And that's here at FSG.
Yeah. Jason, as the industry continues to evolve, obviously we have conversations about EVs, solar, data centers, all that. It's sort of changed the sales cycle a little bit. And one of the places you do see that pretty dramatically is in sort of that mission critical world. Can you talk about how that sales cycle maybe varies a little bit versus maybe some of the traditional RFP methods and longer term bid cycles?
Yeah, and I would say, essentially the demand on mission critical work or data centers in general, the pre-lease as far as potentially years before a data center is even built, they already have that particular data center already leased as far as the capacity that it can produce and the compute capacity that it can produce. So the sales cycle is generally very quick. In other words, like you might be in on potentially the design side of things or the budgeting side of things, navigates to a final price, and then essentially it's started as long as all of the other components like outside infrastructure, land, everything else is available. Those projects start quick and they complete quick. In other words, they want to get it open, and because it's already pre-leased, and so the leasing rates percentages as it were, potentially, if it's not just an AWS data center or just a Meta data center or just a Google data center, to where it's a group. So there's basically leasing the data center compute capacity. Those percentages that are already pre-leased is so high that they almost can't build them fast enough.
I hate to sort of harp on the data center world, but ironically, it's sort of the epicenter of a lot of the conversations we're having right now is a technology and electrical and utilities community. Obviously, as that sort of world of data centers continues to evolve, there's a lot of different people and even contractors and subs and commercial partners that have to be part of that and be really on time, right? So now you're collaborating with HVAC and technology and install at a larger scale, really, than you probably are in many other projects. How important is it to have that sort of coordination with maybe some of those outside vendors and partners that aren't part of necessarily the FSG network?
Unbelievable. I mean, from when I started, blueprints were actually blue and they had to be printed and you could smell the ink and the whole 9 yards, right? And versus today, right? Technology has come so far, really so fast within the last 10 years, as far as everything is done virtually now. Everyone, potentially all the leads on the job site have tablets that are updated in real time. If a change happens from the architect to the engineer, it makes it to the field instantly so that as they're installing things, they see everything in real time. Technology has really helped, and it's benefited. Construction industry has benefited from technology because of that, and I see the future of technology continuing to evolve to where, basically, essentially we're going to have these VR headsets and, they're already out there. And as that, scale happens in the virtual world, you're going to see that a lot of these things are built, virtually to where you don't even need to have a tablet. You'll just see what needs to go and where it needs to go. It's going to be amazing to watch technology continue to help the construction industry grow and be more efficient, because that's what it's about is the efficiency. And then that technology helps to essentially, coordinate all the subs. There's potentially fewer meetings. Everything is done in coordination through BIM modeling and those technologies that are out there to where the job is fully coordinated to where all the subs know exactly where they're needing to run their, materials and all of that stuff throughout the job site to where it's all pre-coordinated for you and it's done virtually and it's all, just a finger push away, of what you need to do.
You might have just opened a can of worms a little bit. We don't have time to dig into this whole sort of digital world on this episode today, but I do want to ask about sort of the idea of digital twinning, right? Because you talked about being able to make adjustments in real time, which then goes off to all the subs and the HVAC guy and the install guy. And now they can all see that virtually, whether it's through a headset, whether it's through an iPad, whatever. Have you seen that create incremental growth opportunities or incremental speed and efficiency opportunities from an install standpoint?
Yeah, for sure. And mainly, as far as the speed of the updates, is kind of what you're talking about. What it helps to reduce and eliminate, we don't want any of it, is rework, right? So if you've done something, but there was a change made, nobody else knew about it. Well, everything that was done not only needs to be taken back out, it has to be reinstalled according to the change. So that's, fundamentally is what is helping create these efficiencies for eliminating rework, but having everything done and installed the first time the right way, exactly the way it needs to be. And that change might have not come about 30 minutes before they actually install what they were going to do. So it's helped in a big way.
Well, hey, and that savings passes on to the end buyer and customer too. And you can save people a little bit of money by speed and efficiency. That's never a bad thing.
Yes, I agree.
Well, last question here. We'll land the plane with this. Obviously, lots of innovation, lots of growth happening with FSG. But I want to ask about you. What are you most excited about for the next 5 to 10 years of FSG?
I think it's just, again, I hate to harp on it, but coming back to what does the market look like, right? And our market is growing exponentially, in the technology space, as far as the mission critical. Hospitals are very important. Water, wastewater is very important. It's exciting to see, those projections that are out there, and the demand that the world needs of these things. And, it's really exciting at this point in my career, to see these things evolve and to have a clear picture on what the next 5 to 10 years looks like. And it's not, a projection that isn't rooted based in facts. I mean, these are the facts. The world is moving into a technological world to where everything is going to be virtual. Everything's going to be AI. Those things we weren't even talking about AI 2 years ago. It wasn't even a component. I mean, it was out there, but there wasn't any real technology like the NVIDIAs or these companies that are developing AI now. It's amazing how fast that stuff is being developed. And so that's what's exciting is being able to see it, and live it every day.
Well, that's why a partner like FSG is so important and great to have, both at the very beginning and all the way through the service and support side. You guys cover all of it. But Jason, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Yes, sir. This is good to be here. Really good to meet you. I enjoyed the studio. Great place you got here. So thank you for having me.
Thank you. And thank you all for tuning in. Be sure to check us out next time on the show.